In the mid-1980s, an educational psychologist called Lee Shulman developed the concept of pedagogical content knowledge, or PCK for short. Shulman famously changed George Bernard Shaw's phrase, "those who can do, those who can't teach," to this that we see here, "those who can do, those who understand, teach." Teachers have always needed to have two essential skills: content knowledge, or CK, which is a deep understanding of the subject they were teaching, and pedagogical knowledge, or PK, the ability and the skills needed to actually teach. Shulman argued that PCK is bringing these two skills together and going one step further to know how to teach, what they need to teach to the specific people that need to learn. Skilled teachers will be able to use PCK to enhance student learning. They'll use their expert subject knowledge to use effective resources and activities to facilitate learning that is expertly aimed at specific groups of students. They will use syntactic knowledge to understand how learning fits together and be able to access prior learning to gauge any gaps which must be filled before moving on to the next or the more in-depth subjects. They'll have deep understanding of their particular group of students, meaning that they can use different techniques dependent on the skills, abilities, and developmental stage of their learners, whilst taking into account any special educational needs. Great teachers will use their expertise and experience to proactively address any common misconceptions. They'll know which mistakes are often made and how to give students the skills and knowledge to address these or to avoid them altogether. All of these examples of PCK will massively enhance student learning experiences and outcomes. I'm a teacher at Chatsworth High School in Salford, which is a special educational needs school. We currently have around 180 students based across our 3 sites who are aged 11 to 19 years old. All of our students have education, health and care plans, or EHCPs, and they have a range of severe and profound learning difficulties and autism. I primarily work with autistic students, specifically those with behavioural issues, in the newly set up complex needs department. Myself and other teachers at my school use a variety of PCK to translate our subject knowledge into forms that are more accessible and comprehensible to our students without diluting its essential concepts. Other PCK we use and consider are student needs. I need to have a strong understanding of each student's EHCP content, sensory diet plans, behaviour support plans, etc., to adapt the teaching to suit their individual and varied needs. Differentiation and adaptation. Each lesson needs to be differentiated so it's accessible for each student and their varying needs. This could mean using enlarged copies for those with visual impairments, overlays for dyslexic students, or assistive technology such as eye gazes. The lesson content needs to be carefully considered and broken down so it's accessible for all students also. Assessment. I use strong formative assessment methods so that student learning is checked throughout the lesson in a way that is appropriate for them, and suitable summative assessment dependent on students' needs. This could be a simple self-assessment method where the student points to a green, yellow or red face to say how secure they feel their knowledge is, or even simpler, I might ask them to select from a choice between I like and I don't like symbols. Collaboration. I must use a multidisciplinary approach to ensure holistic support. I work with colleagues such as social workers, SENCOs, educational psychologists, speech and language therapists, occupational therapists and hydrotherapists, so that we can ensure the best outcomes for our students. Reflective practice. Continuous reflection on teaching practice, identifying strengths and areas for improvement, and then addressing those with appropriate CPD. For example, one of my current students likes to smear feces, which is obviously impacting on their learning time. I've sought training support to understand their sensory need for this behaviour, so I can try to proactively meet the sensory need during lessons by enabling their learning through, for example, using palm water glue with a similar texture to mark make during writing lessons. I'd like to focus on one aspect in a bit more depth: communication. Although a good number of our students are verbal, all of them have difficulties with communication. Every teacher adapts their communication to suit the needs of the learners, but we're moving to standardise this now to avoid confusion for our students and improve learning outcomes. All lessons will start with a plain PowerPoint page, as we can see here, containing the lesson symbol and an auditory cue, which is a song relating to the lesson. The teacher will also show each student an object of reference, which is an actual object relating to the lesson along with a symbol of it. You can see here some of the ones we use now for lessons such as cooking and religion. In the past, teachers have used non-verbal communication such as signing interchangeably with a variety of British Sign Language, Makaton and Sign Along. This has led to a lack of understanding amongst our pupils, so we'll now all be receiving training on BSL, which we will use to support our learners and teach them as their MFL modern foreign language where appropriate. A lot of our students exhibit challenging behaviour, which is in itself a method of communication. By implementing a whole school approach on standardising communication, we hope to see a reduction in incidents of behaviour, which would be a really positive way to quantitatively measure this change. In conclusion, teachers must have great content knowledge and teaching knowledge, but they must also be able to use PCK to actually teach the subject matter in an accessible way to all students. In February 2014, Professor David Hopkins published an article about theories of action. He stated that a theory of action is a link between cause and effect. If we take a particular action, then we expect that action to have specific effects. A theory of action connects the actions of teachers with the consequences of their actions, which are the learning and achievement of their students. Professor Hopkins identified 6 key areas of action. So firstly, harnessing learning intentions, narrative and pace. Basically meaning that teachers should have clear learning objectives which are strongly linked to the lesson content and curriculum and will drive student learning at an appropriate rate. Secondly, setting challenging learning tasks. So tasks should be realistic and achievable, but there should also be opportunities to stretch and challenge more able learners. Thirdly, framing higher order questions. So teachers should consider Bloom's taxonomy and should avoid questions on the lower level of the pyramid around knowledge, comprehension and application, and instead focus on those questions which will deepen student understanding and are towards the top of Bloom's pyramid. Those questions that are around analysis, evaluation and synthesis. Fourth, connecting data and feedback. Teachers should give meaningful, motivational feedback which links student effort to their performance or outcomes. Fifth, committing to assessment for learning. Make it absolutely clear to students what level they're working at now. Give feedback on past performance and clear instructions on how they can improve. And lastly, number 6, implementing cooperative group structures. So instilling a sense of mutual responsibility in the classroom means that academic performance will increase for the class as a whole. Many of the PCK areas I outlined earlier will also overlap with theories of action. However, considering Hopkins' 6 key focus areas, I wanted to talk about one in particular, target setting. There's been a real push to make targets more meaningful in my school. We've been instructed to only use SMART targets now when setting core learning targets for our students. George T. Duran in 1981 created the mnemonic acronym stating SMART, stating that targets should be specific, so clearly state what the goal is, measurable, for example, an end test or feedback, achievable, a goal which is realistically attainable, relevant, so relevant to the student and the subject area, and time-bound, set a deadline for when the goal is to be achieved. For example, in the past, if a student's core target was to make choices and they were motivated by food, a target might have been set like, Tom will choose his own snack. Now we would make this a SMART target, such as Tom will point to his preferred snack when given a choice of 2, 3 out of 5 times over the course of a week. Then, to make the targets accessible to the students, we would print their own version off using symbols so that they can easily understand. Although this isn't a SMART target, it's easily understood by the student, and the teacher will have the SMART target themselves against which to measure progress. Next, I want to take a look at theories of learning which inform PCK and theories of action. There are many learning theories. Here's a brief summary of 5 of the main ones. Cognitive learning theory. Researchers such as Piaget and Bruner states that learning should be active and not passive, and that it involves mental processes such as problem solving, memory, reasoning, and perception. Behaviorism learning theory. Researchers such as Pavlov and Skinner stated that behaviours depend on the external environment and can be conditioned or formed by positive and negative reinforcement. Researchers such as Dewey and Vygotsky looked at constructivism learning theory. This says that understanding is created through previous knowledge and experiences, which shapes how new information is processed. Humanist learning theory, with famous researchers such as Maslow and Rogers, and this theory states that everyone has the ability to achieve their full potential or achieve self-actualization, and focuses on motivation as well as needs, wants, and interests. And lastly, connectivism learning theory, used by researchers such as Simmons and Downs. This is the process of integrating new experiences and information into an individual's existing web of knowledge. I'm going to look now at two learning theories which are especially relevant in my school. First, considering humanism, Maslow's hierarchy of needs shows how motivation increases once the needs at each level are fulfilled. First, a student's physiological needs are met with food, water, sleep, clothing, etc., and then their safety needs. So students should feel secure and free from any danger or pain to be ready to learn. Next, they should feel a sense of belonging in the classroom before moving up to the esteem level, where they feel self-confident and ready to try new things. Finally, they will be able to reach self-actualization, being creative, making useful contributions, and achieving personal growth and development. In my school, we must be especially mindful of meeting the needs of our students at that bottom layer of the pyramid. At a classroom level, this means the HCPs and behaviour support plans must be carefully followed at all times and reviewed regularly with parents and any professionals involved, such as a speech and language therapist, ed psych, school nurse, and senior leadership team. Although classes have relatively small numbers of students, usually between 4 and 12, there could be a variety of different physiological needs in each class, such as medical. We might have an oxygen tank, have line feeding, toilet care needs, hoist usage for moving students from wheelchairs, and emergency medication for seizures and absences such as buccal. Communication. Non-verbal or low-level language processing and understanding could mean that adjusted language is needed, along with PSL and or picture communication systems such as PECS. Behavioural. Defiance, anxiety, self-harm, aggression, absconding. Staff could also need to be trained on restrictive physical intervention or RPIs. So all of these must be considered before looking at how each student's disabilities and learning difficulties impact on how they can learn and how the curriculum should be adapted for them. Secondly, I looked at behaviourist theory. The two main types of behaviourism are classical conditioning and operant conditioning. The most notable example of classical conditioning is Ivan Pavlov, who in 1897 observed that a dog salivated, which is an unconditioned response, when it was fed food, the unconditioned stimulus. He then went on to notice that the dog actually began to salivate when the person who fed the dog entered the room. It had learned a response, salivating, based on the stimulus, the person entering the room. Next, Pavlov experimented with ringing a tuning fork each time the dog was about to eat. Soon the dog would salivate, a conditioned response, whenever it heard the tuning fork, a conditioned stimulus. Operant conditioning is most famously attributed to Skinner, who in 1925 experimented. He believed that learners were active as well as passive learners, and experimented on changing voluntary behaviour by using rewards and punishment. He placed rats into boxes known as Skinner's boxes, and if they knocked a lever, they'd receive a food pellet, which is the reward or positive reinforcement. In a further experiment, the rats would receive an electric current when inside the Skinner box, but when they knocked the lever, the current would stop. So that was the negative reinforcement. The main advantage to a behaviourism approach is that it's quite simplistic, meaning the learners understand the clear rule set and know the rewards and punishments that are a direct result of their behaviour. A disadvantage, apart from the obvious ethical concerns of using animals to experiment, are that it can take some time to implement learned behaviours. In my school, teachers control or change learner behaviour by using positive and negative reinforcement, rewards and punishments. Rewards such as giving treats, praise, stickers, etc. mean the behaviour is more likely to be repeated. Punishments or reprimands such as missing a break time will discourage the behaviour from being repeated. Both of these learning theories are extremely important in my school and inform most of what we do. Next, I considered models of teaching. Models of teaching are different structured frameworks or approaches which allow teachers to plan and implement lessons in a way which enhances student learning. The carousel teaching method has recently been introduced in my school. Before the summer break, all teachers and TA3s received training in this method and were asked to implement it in lessons this new school year wherever possible. Carousel teaching is where the teacher introduces a topic, checks prior knowledge, and gives a brief description of the subject they will be learning about in that lesson. The subjects of the students are then split into usually 3 groups and sent to different stations where the knowledge is further explored in a hands-on practical way. A member of staff will be on each workstation to facilitate the students' learning. After a set amount of time, the students will then move on to the next learning station until all students have completed the carousel and been to each station. They then come together for a plenary activity at the end. Here's an example from one of my lessons this week. The subject was functional skills and the topic was money. I first talked about what money is used for and the different types of money, i.e. paper and coins, then sent the students to a different carousel. Group 1 was very much a fun sensory activity where students could look at the size and shape of the coins by exploring using scented Play-Doh. Group 2 sorted the coins into different colours, sizes and shapes, and Group 3 put paper over the top and traced them using crayons. The activities in each of these groups could be further differentiated depending on the ability of the students. So, for example, when sorting the coins, some might sort into brown and silver colours, while some might sort into 1p, 2p, 5p and so on. Or, in activity 3, they could use different coloured crayons to trace the different types of coins. The advantages of carousel learning are that hands-on learning is more exciting and leads to more student engagement. It's a more equitable environment, so all students get to take part, including those that might not usually volunteer an answer. There's also less pressure on students to mess up or give a wrong answer, as they're in small groups or more likely to participate. It's a much more collaborative learning style with lots of time for discussion amongst the learning station facilitator and the students. This productive talk means students can explain their reasoning, listen to others, and challenge each other in a small group, safe environment. This also has the added bonus of really embedding English language skills in a meaningful way into each lesson. Actively participating in conversation whilst engaging in a learning activity increases neural activity, as opposed to passively listening to information being passed on. There's less emphasis on outcomes and more emphasis on the process of learning and reinforcement of knowledge. With some creative thinking, the carousel method can be used for all subjects and to students of all ability levels. For example, have stations with A3 white paper on and get students to write down and brainstorm their own ideas. Carousel does particularly suit the developmental level of my school students as we work to a primary school model. The disadvantages of carousel teaching are that the teacher not usually has to man one of the carousel stations, so relies on the staff at the other stations to ensure that high quality learning is taking place. This may not always happen, especially when on-the-spot decisions need to be made to differentiate the learning, making it effective and meaningful to all students. I've tried to alleviate this when deploying staff, by debriefing the staff fully beforehand and carefully considering which staff members to place at which station. Also, as plenary normally takes place at the end of the lesson, it's too late to help students who may not have understood. I'm going to try and consider how to introduce formative assessment during carousel lessons. There was initially some pushback from teachers at my school as they felt it could increase workload. However, now that carousel learning has been implemented, all the teachers are reporting higher levels of student engagement, and the students themselves say that lessons are more fun and they feel like they're learning more. Lastly, I considered how PCK, theories of action and models of teaching could all be enriched through peer observation or peer coaching. So there's no universal definition for peer coaching. It's not a one-size-fits-all model, and so each situation requires a different framework implementation, which is really what makes it so exciting and applicable across all different types of schools and disciplines. Well, there are 2 main forms of peer coaching. Led by experts, where a teacher works with a less experienced person in a peer coaching partnership, where the experienced person usually acts as the coach, and reciprocal. With reciprocal peer coaching, the partners work alongside each other and share the coaching role to find ways to empower each other in their practice. There are places for both of these depending on the skills and experiences of those taking part. Some key characteristics of peer coaching are clear and open lines of communication. So Showers and Joyce did a study in 1982 where they included verbal feedback. When they revisited the study in 1996, they removed this from the coaching structure as they discovered that when the teachers in their research tried to give each other feedback, the collaboration between the partnerships often collapsed. They said that providing only constructive, non-evaluative feedback is essential. Trust. Robertson and Wegner and colleagues' studies both stated that trust is crucial but can take time to develop. A feeling of trust should also be felt towards the facilitator of the peer coaching partnerships. On reflection, Jackson said in 2004 that as peer coaching is essentially a very reflective practice, participants should be adept at this before beginning peer coaching. Robertson expanded on this by saying that participants are often eager to share their thoughts on the experience, but that without critical reflective skills alongside effective reflective listening skills, issues cannot be resolved. Lastly, I considered how PCK, theories of action, and models of teaching could all be enriched through peer observation or peer coaching. Peer coaching can be a powerful tool for enriching both pedagogical content knowledge and the application of teaching models in many ways. Collaboration. Peer coaching encourages collaboration amongst teachers, which can lead to developing new and innovative teaching methods. Sharing best practice. Peer coaching allows teachers to share their successful teaching strategies and methods with each other, in turn improving their PCK. Constructive real-time feedback. Peer coaching enables teachers to receive constructive feedback from their peers, helping them to identify areas for improvement in their pedagogical approaches. Problem solving. Peer coaching can help teachers who are facing challenges as their peers can offer solutions and alternative approaches that have worked for them. Ongoing professional development. Peer coaching gives opportunities for CPD as peers can help to identify training gaps and also, importantly, aid them in identifying methods of filling those training gaps. And reflection and self-assessment. A fundamental aspect of peer coaching is for teachers to reflect on their teaching practices. This self-assessment helps them to understand their strengths and weaknesses and make necessary changes. When successfully implemented, peer coaching can create a supportive environment where teachers learn from each other and continually enhance their teaching models and PCK. In summary, like the jigsaw puzzle we see here, effective knowledge and use of pedagogical content knowledge, theories of action, models of teaching, and peer coaching, all informed by theories of learning, must all be present to ensure the best possible learning outcomes for all of our students. Thank you.